Hi, my name is Julieta Diaz and I am a data scientist at TIBCO. Welcome to this TeamStudio enablement video. In this video, I will cover the random sampling operator. We are starting from the Work Files tab in a workspace I've previously created, and we will click on the random sampling workflow to get to the workflow canvas you can see here. Let's say we have an example of a dataset, the famous iris dataset, and we are thinking about trying out some different modeling techniques. What we want to do before we think about modeling is splitting out our data. It's a good practice to split out your data because you don't want to create models that overfit to whatever data you have. You want them to be able to generalize to future data that you might have or that you might use the model for when it's deployed in production environment. So one way to do this is by looking at the random sampling operator from the operators list. So if we drag that into the canvas and connect that to our dataset, the random sampling operator can then be configured. As usual with TeamStudio, the parts of the operator that need to be configured will come up in yellow. You must define the number of samples that you will want the data to be split into. So for example, you can decide if you want to split the data in k-folds to do cross-validation. In this case, I'm going to set the value to, and I will end up making a train and test split. I'm selecting percentage, but you could of course go for a number of rows if that's something that is more appropriate for you. The sample size is where we will specify how big each of those splits will be. So after we have decided that we wanted 2 samples in this particular case, I'm going to do a typical split, which is 80 for the train set and 20 for the test set. This could be the other way around, depending on how big your dataset is. If you have a very large dataset, you might not need to train it on so much, or you might split it out in k ways so that you could have a cross-validation score. You can decide how to configure this entirely. One more thing to draw your attention to is the consistent feature. If you select true, you will then need to specify the random seed, which is a number between 0 and 1. The reason you will do this is because using a consistent split is a good way to be able to compare your different models, especially if you have some models that are deployed in production and you want to see if you have improved upon them. It's a good idea to have the same type of trained data that is sent to each of the different models. So the random seed is just ensuring that you are splitting the data in the same way so each of the training and testing splits look the same. You are not just randomizing those percentages and showing different things. Therefore, you will be able to assess the models on the same metric that you choose. I'm going to go for 42, which, if you have seen some coders, they typically use this value. There are other parameters that you can configure. For example, you can specify whether the sampling is with or without replacement. If replacement is selected, both the consistent and disjoint properties are set to false and disabled. The key columns property is used combined with the consistent property. If we click on Select Columns, it displays a dialog which is used for selecting the columns to ensure the ordering of the data before generating the pseudo-random sample dataset. Finally, we can decide if we want the operator to save the results by setting yes here, and we can specify the schema for the output table, the table path, and the name where the output of the results is generated. There is one more step. You have to select the sample selector operator now from the operators list. Once we had connected that to a random sampling, if you open up the operator properties, you will see here that we have configured in the random sampling operator whether it should be 80 or 20%. That's what we will be able to select here. I'm going to go for the sample 1, the 80% here, and I'm also going to change this to say training sampling selector, just so that I know in my mind that this is the bigger percentage of my two splits. Then you need to do the same thing to pick up the secondary sample, and it automatically selects the other sample for us. But just to check that it's configured properly, we see sample 2, 20%, so we can press OK. We can rename this to say testing, and then our data is ready for whatever you will be doing next. Thank you for watching.